Your Creative Push, episode 294.
Don't give up. Be determined in your not giving upness, but be flexible regarding how it might show up.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngman Brown, and my guest today is Aliza Einhorn. Aliza is a writer, an astrologer, and a tarot reader, and she comes on today for a different episode, but one that will 100% inspire you to get to your own creative passions and maybe think about the world in a little bit of a different way. And Aliza comes on this show today to talk about her first book, The Little Book of Saturn, and how that first book ended up not being a book of poetry, which she always thought that her first book was going to be, and also why she stopped writing poems while in her 30s. And going along with that, Aliza talks about identity and whether or not we can define ourselves by something that we no longer do or something that we haven't done for a long time. Aliza and I also have a conversation about dual identity, where one half of you is focused on your day job and making money, while the other half is focused on your creative passion and doing what you truly love, and how to kind of find that balance or how to live comfortably in that balance. She also gives us a crash course of tarot and how it can help creative people with their creative blocks, and also how astrology is a tool for self-awareness and self-discovery. She also talks about working with Tom Hart, a previous guest on the podcast, and the Sequential Artist Workshop, and how creating art and finding your audience is kind of like internet dating. And finally, Aliza talks about the experience of writing and publishing her first book. And if all of that isn't enough for you, for my Patreon supporters, you get a special bonus in this episode, because after the episode, Aliza gave me a personal astrology reading to look into my future to see what is in the stars for me. It was pretty fun to do, and I'm really happy to share that with you all. But before all of that, we have a wonderfully inspiring episode with one of my new favorite people, Aliza Einhorn. Please enjoy. Aliza, welcome to Your Creative Push.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. I think we're both drinking our coffee and trying to wake up here, but I'm very excited to talk to you about not just your creative journey, but about tarot and astrology and how that can all help creative people. So I'm really excited for this.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Yay. Okay. Well, I always like to give my guests kind of the beginning of the episode, the platform to kind of share your story, how your kind of creative journey began, and how you got to the point you are today.
Okay. Well, my journey started a long time ago. I'm one of those people who will say that they were always a writer. You know, always a writer, always writing, even as a kid. Flash forward, in college, I majored in English because I didn't know what else to do. And then flash forward again, I wound up getting an MFA in poetry at Iowa because it really was the only thing that I could do. So I thought at the time. And for some reason, I thought it was going to be a straight line, which is kind of hilarious looking back because there is no straight line for poets or for writers or for creative people.
Any creative person, yeah.
Yeah. So I got out of Iowa with my MFA and no skills at all. And thinking, oh, I'm gonna publish my manuscript tomorrow, you know, and I'm gonna get a university job and doors are just gonna open. This was actually in my head, you know, and nothing could have been further from the truth. So the journey continued. It continued and continued and continued. And I kept writing, but life kept taking different turns. And it didn't happen the way I thought it would. So now I'm really jumping ahead. But decades later, my first book just came out in June, and it has.
Yay!
Oh, thank you, thank you for that cheer.
Yay!
But it wasn't as a poet. And you know, of course, in between age 23 and the age that I am now, you know, there was still lots of writing and life experience and living, but it took me this long. Which is one reason that I wanted to talk to you and talk to your audience, is to tell people that it can take a long time. And you can peak early in terms of, doing good work, like you can be an amazing writer young, but no one may see it or want it.
Right. It's all about timing. And yes, it can take a long time. And that's something I wanted to ask you then. Did that ever hold you back since you had that idea in your head for so long that your first book was going to be about poetry? Is that something that held you back from writing this book?
It didn't, but when I was in my 30s, I stopped writing poems completely because a friend of mine was a playwright and he saw me struggling and he said, why don't you do this other genre? You might have better luck or you might get plays produced sooner than you're getting, your poems published. And he was actually right. So I was kind of happy to jump ship then, like, oh, okay, I'll try this other thing. So that didn't stop me. I felt the irony of it, or maybe a bit of a disconnect, but I'm really a poet. I think it held me back in a way too, because here I was, I had to learn how to write a nonfiction book. I had to learn how to do that, because you take a poet and you say, all right, we need, a different kind of sentence here. It's got to make a different kind of sense for a general reader, or someone who's discovering astrology for the first time. You can't be too poetic. Mm-hmm. You have to be more practical and you have to teach. So that was a big learning curve.
Right. And now is poetry something that you're getting back to now?
No. I haven't written a poem in a long time. And that's actually something I think about a lot, is identity. Who we were then, are we still that? How does it figure in? Am I not a poet anymore? Are you a writer if you're not writing? Are you a poet if you're not writing poems? Is it personality? Is it something that you do? Like, which is it? So no, now I've gone totally to the dark side.
Side.
Yeah. And I just want to do this.
Nice. Well, I don't know what that stat is that we every 7 years we're a completely different person because we lose all of our cells. They all regenerate. I'm not sure what the timeline is, but at a certain point in time, every part of you is something different than it was previously. So I think that, I think we can change, and I think that there's always that potential to go back to that thing that we used to love. Sometimes we actually need a break from it too, in order to kind of cleanse our soul, so to speak, or to learn something new, or to be at a different place in life in order to kind of get back to that thing. So I think it's really important for people to just, go for whatever your kind of heart is telling you, whatever your soul, whatever you want to call it, is kind of pushing you in that direction, and to not be afraid to leave this thing that you previously defined yourself as,
Yes. This poetry teacher of mine decades ago used to tell us to murder our darlings. So, when we were very attached to some line, like, oh my God, this first line of the poem, and he would just cross it out, the poem doesn't start here. He would show us where it actually started. So, but who knows, maybe it'll come back, maybe.
Right. Well, yeah, we will see, and we'll keep in contact and find out. Well, let's get into tarot then.
Okay.
Can you talk a little bit about, maybe explain it for somebody who has that very base understanding, as I did, of what tarot is, and maybe kind of pull them in, so to speak.
What is tarot for? Okay, so the origins of tarot. I mean, it was originally a card game. You just like playing cards, and then became used for fortune telling. Now, in this day and age, of course, people do use it for fortune telling, for divination, for prediction, which is part of what I do in my job and for myself as well. But more than that, it stimulates your mind, your imagination, your heart to go in directions that it wouldn't normally go, almost like a writing prompt. Like, let's say you have a deck of cards and you're shuffling your cards. Let's say you're writing something, or you're working, whatever the project is you're working on creatively. And you have a deck of cards and you're shuffling them and you're thinking, I'm totally stuck. Where does this project need to go now? What do I do? You draw a card, and that's part of your answer. It pushes you along. It gives you information. And using your intuition, you figure out what it means. Because actually, to use the tarot, you don't need to learn book meanings because it's images, it's pictures. You can look and you can feel, oh, I see what it's telling me. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. And now, how did you first get into tarot and then become a professional in it?
Oh, well, years ago when I lived in New York, I did a Google search. I don't even know what caused me to do this Google search, but all of a sudden I was looking for an astrology class, just like out of the blue. And then I found one and this is, before Facebook. The internet existed, but it wasn't like it is now. So if I had done this today, maybe I would have found something online, that didn't exist then, but I found an in-person class, and that was how I started learning astrology. Every week I would go back to this class, and he taught tarot too. So I learned week after week going to this class. And I just got obsessed, and it took over my entire soul. And here we are now. I never thought that I would do it for a living, because then I still had that like full on writer identity. I'm a writer, I'm a poet, I'm a playwright, and then I have a day job, whatever my day job is. And it was very separate. And, that was just life, right? Having these two different paths. And then slowly, I suddenly realized, oh, I can do this. Meaning I can read charts for other people, or I can draw cards for other people. I'm not just learning, I'm not just learning and understanding. Like, this is something that I can do. And I actually had a day, I remember it very well, because I was sitting, I don't go to McDonald's, but it was raining really heavy. I think it was in Union Square. It was raining really heavy, and I was sitting in McDonald's to get out of the rain. And I was reading an astrology book, and the author was talking about a particular thing that's, if it's in your chart, you can be an astrologer, because it shows that you'd be good at it. It shows your aptitude. Like, oh yeah, you have such and such going on. Be an astrologer. Good career choice. And I was reading that, and I took it to heart, and I thought, you know what? I've been learning this for years now. I'm going to do it. So it was like this weird, impulsive, I'm going to jump in. And I remember thinking at that time, I'm not going to write anything anymore unless it's directly related to my income, which I want now to be astrology. So, you can get a taste of my thinking here. It's a little weird. It's not like, who sits around going, yes, I found my career path. I'm going to be an astrologer. It doesn't really make sense. But that was how it started.
Well, I think oftentimes, like, we get those impulses or those surges of, yes, this is the thing I want to do, but like our brains or like our logical thinking will try to protect us and say, no, that's silly. Like, you need to continue this like double identity thing where like you do this thing on the side, maybe have fun in your free time. But, the thing that you do for money is the thing that you do. Like, be smart about it. You know what I mean? And it's very hard for us to make that kind of connection. Like, oh, actually, I can. If I really put my heart and soul into this, I can make this into like my thing.
Yeah, and you know what? I was never good at normal jobs. Like the job that I left, I was a pet sitter in New York City. I was a dog walker and a cat sitter on my own, not working for anyone else. I failed until that time. I failed at every job I ever had. Like I would quit. I would get fired. Anything that was too confining, anything in an office, anything with too many people. I mean, that's another, in this day and age, it's so much easier because of the internet. People can work at home, but that's another thing that's so important that especially young people or even older people understand, is that it's not one size fits all, and you can really create your work. You can create your life. You just have to do it. You can't wait for someone else to do it for you.
Right. Well, now, can you give us kind of a very basic crash course in astrology for people that maybe think that it's kind of hokey pokey? I don't know what the word is, or like out there,
woo-woo.
or woo-woo. Yeah. Can you explain it? Because you do a great job in your book, kind of explaining where it came from, and yeah. And the good thing, I guess it depends who you ask, but the good thing is that this stuff, it's so trendy now. Like, it's really, really hot compared to when I first started doing this. So, even if you had this podcast like 5 years ago, you might have said to me, I don't know if I want her on, because it might have been too weird.
But today it's becoming more acceptable and more okay.
Mm-hmm.
But a crash course in astrology, you know, you have a birthday. You're born at a particular time, in a particular place, particular day and month, year. And what astrologers do is we take that information and we create a chart. You know, the ancient astrologers or the very sophisticated ones of today do it by hand. The rest of us use software. We input that information and then we know who you are. It's a map of you, your likes, your dislikes, your challenges, what you're good at, like personality analysis, basically. But that's just the first level. But that's what astrologers see when they look at your chart. They start seeing you. It's like a picture. It's a picture of you in this symbolic language. And then other things come into play, like prediction, or you want to get really woo-woo, past lives. So it kind of goes on and on. You know, there's different, there's various areas of astrology too. And it can get, you know, more and more esoteric and more mystical. I'm pretty basic though. I'm practical. I'm a practical astrologer. Yeah, I'm an advice giver. That's mostly what I do. People come to me and they say, "Oh my God, my life, it's falling apart." And I look at the chart and I see, oh, okay, this is why. This is what's happening. This is when it's going to end. You know, not the life, the difficulty, or here's the good stuff going on. So it's a tool for self-awareness and self-discovery and personality analysis and where's a good place for you to live and what your relationship is like, because we compare charts too. Does this make sense for the crash course? Yes. So you want to be careful when you make friends with an astrologer, because they're going to ask for your information and they're going to see you.
Oh yeah. Well, I think that's cool too. And what does that do for creative people to kind of be able to put themselves in, like, not a story, but to kind of give like a little bit of structure in order to tell themselves like what kind of where their lives are going, you know? I
love that question. You know what it is? It's validating. Because let's say there's someone who their whole life is attracted to us, like they want to be a painter, and maybe their family totally discourages it and wants them to have some very conventional path, but that's their passion. You know, they want to make art, they want to paint, and they can't follow it for whatever reason. And then an astrologer comes along who doesn't know this person at all and looks in the chart and says, "Oh my God, you would be incredible at this. You're totally suited for this. You have the skills, you have the temperament. This is you." So I think it's validating for that, and it's validating for anything about yourself that you haven't accepted or don't really like. You know what I mean? Like the way we blame ourselves for how we are. Well, we can look in the chart and we can see, oh, so that's why I have trouble sticking to a routine, or that's why I'm so sensitive. You know, like artists, creative people are always, you know, oh, we're so sensitive. Well, you can look in the damn chart and you can see, well, of course he's sensitive or she's sensitive, because look where the moon is. Moon's in the first house. They're going to have a lot of feelings. And then the astrologer is going to say to the person, well, you're going to have a lot of feelings forever and ever. That's never going to change. So what are you going to do with it? You know, you need an outlet. So maybe you should be a painter.
Yeah, I think that's one of the purposes of this podcast, is to kind of put a name to resistances, to put a name to creative blocks, and to realize that everybody does go through it, and it's okay that this thing in your head that you couldn't quite define, or maybe a multitude of things in your head that are trying to kind of hold you back, or like we said before, keep you safe, that we all kind of deal with it. And once you can kind of name it, you can tame it. I forget who said that.
Yeah.
But it's so true. Like, to be able to kind of give yourself that, and not necessarily an excuse, but to give yourself a reason as to like why you've been feeling this certain way, or why you've been letting people tell you how you should be fitting into society in a normal way. To be able to kind of just have that structure to it makes it much easier to kind of overcome it.
You know, that's exactly how astrology works, because that's what we see. We see who you are and then how to work with it. And then the timing, because you can be in a difficult phase and feel really blocked for 3 months, and then everything's fine. Or we can see a phase that can last years, and then you need a plan for that. So yeah, that's one of my favorite words lately, actually, is resistance.
Oh, I love it.
And what to do about it.
Right.
How not to resist resistance, because that'll get you too. Sometimes you have to not resist the resistance.
Right. Well, what are some of the ways that, especially with creative people that you've encountered or that you've read for, what are some of the things that you've really been able to help them with?
Gosh, I love that question because I love working with creative people, and I've worked with a lot of very frustrated creative people because, everyone's comparing these days, especially in the age of social media. Oh, well, how come I don't have? I see so-and-so's Instagram, how come I don't have 8,000, 10,000, 100,000 followers or whatever? That's one of the most important things, is to remind people of that to keep doing what they are called to do, despite, what everyone else is doing. Because that's only going to throw you off track. It's hard not to do it. It's hard not to compare, but it's like a little devil on your shoulder, taking you away from your holy work. Instead of working on my stuff, I'm going to worry about so-and-so. I mean, we all do it. I think most of us do it.
Yeah, I would agree.
But to help people get back on track and figure out their passion and focus on it. And, one of the most pressing issues that I see is people who just don't do the work. Like, creativity is not a problem. There's at least the people that I deal with, they're extremely creative. They have tons of ideas. One of the biggest problems I see is just sitting down and doing it. Having a routine, which is also very Saturn, having a routine, having structure, having a plan, and taking that creativity and shaping it and making things, not just, letting it wander in your mind with no destination.
Right.
And without worrying about outcome, because you don't know what's going to happen to it.
Yep, you never do, and it's the hardest thing to let go of is knowing, not knowing where you're going to end up. But the important thing is to kind of go to it anyway. Yeah.
And also this is one of the great things about social media, is that you don't need anyone else. Like, you really can create your own empire.
Right.
Wherever you want, just set up shop and don't stop doing it.
Yeah. You don't even need an empire, which is the cool thing. Like, you just need a very small following, a small loyal following to really make it these days.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, I'm not the biggest astrologer out there by any means, but I've been solid. I've been doing this a long time, and I have my loyal people, and I'm still here. But there's talk about comparing. I mean, there's people who started way after me. Their numbers are much bigger. But, I don't want to call it a game, but the game is about consistency. Consistency, commitment, good work, doing good work, showing up, believing in it.
Yep. Like you mentioned before, some people can start out hot and go real quick.
Yeah.
But you got to just stay consistent and stay with it. And then just trust that you're going to end up in the right place.
And that the right people find you, yes. Whether that's a publisher or a client or whatever.
Yeah, that's the most important thing. Well, you mentioned Saturn, and of course Saturn is a big deal. That's like the title of your book, The Little Book of Saturn. So can you talk about the importance of Saturn itself? Yeah, Saturn is so important. So in astrology, we're not talking about Pluto, but Pluto is still a planet for us, I have to say. I forget the status. Like, they demoted they demoted Pluto, or maybe they brought Pluto back. But no, they didn't. It's still a dwarf. Bummer. Yeah, a dwarf planet. In astrology land, all the planets and the signs, they all have particular symbolism and associations, keywords and themes, what it's about and what it means. Because everyone's going to have Saturn in their chart. Just can I ask you when your birthday is? Do you know your sun sign? I don't. It's August 4th. Oh, August 4th. Okay, so you're a Leo. Yes. So your sun is in Leo, the sign of Leo, but you also have Saturn somewhere in your chart, and that Saturn's going to be in a particular sign as well. So it matters.
people don't realize how much it matters. And of course, like the average person's not going to know that there's a sun, moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, that whatever that astrologers are looking at. So in terms of themes of Saturn, he's all about the rules. He's all about structure and routine, tradition, convention. Saturn is not wild. Sometimes it's easier to explain things by contrast, like we have the planets that represent chaos or destruction or things breaking down. But what Saturn does is build. Saturn builds, Saturn teaches, Saturn tests, Saturn gives us lessons. That is Saturn. Saturn is authority. Saturn is the father.
The Mac Daddy.
That's right. Yes. So if you have I don't know your chart, of course, but let's say I was looking at your chart and I was saying, oh, look at his Saturn. What's going on over there? And if I see a very, hardworking, disciplined Saturn, then we know that you're going to do your work. We know that you're going to show up to work on time and you're going to, wake up when you're supposed to and eat your vegetables and all of that stuff. You're going to follow the rules that you're supposed to follow. But then as astrologers, we can also see, oh, that Saturn is kind of challenged. So that person might not be so disciplined. He may skip school.
I don't think that's my Saturn.
Yeah, I don't think so either. If you have a regular podcast, then you're working hard.
Yeah, but sometimes that gets in well, like we were talking about before, having the two identities, the podcast I'm usually pretty regimented and good about, but I should always show up at work the very last minute and I'm always trying to leave early. So maybe I'm switching identities here.
And we could probably see that in the chart too. Like we could see, all right, on Mondays he's on it, and then Tuesday he's like, I don't know.
Well, I wanted to talk about Tom Hart and the Sequential Artist Workshop and kind of how that came to be, because Tom Hart was on the show, a wonderful episode. I will have that linked in the show notes page. But I was just wondering kind of how that meeting happened.
Okay. I love him. I love them so much. I love the Saw people. They're amazing. And I want to say if you are a comic artist, or even if you don't want to do comics, but you just want to come and live in Gainesville. I mean, it is such a wonderful program, and they're such wonderful people that you've got to look them up, look them up online, look at and there's online courses too. But how did I met them actually the first day of early voting in this past election. And I met Tom's wife because a friend of mine dragged me to a bar because there was an early voting kind of party, like have a drink and go vote, which I might not normally have done either. I wouldn't have gone to early voting. I would have, voted on whatever the day was. Anyway, so she drags me to this bar and I meet Tom's wife, Leela Corman, who is a wonderful artist, comic artist, illustrator. And she looked at me, or the mutual friend said, oh, you two don't know each other? You've got to meet. So we just started talking, and we started talking about tarot. I guess my friend must have introduced me as doing that. And she looked at me and she said, oh, do you teach tarot? I said, yes, I do. And that was the beginning. So, through her, I met Tom, and then we just started talking about how we could make it happen. And I wound up doing a couple of in-person workshops, day-long workshops, and then I've done one class so far online for SAW.
Very cool. And what's involved with that course?
That course was about making your own deck. It's funny about online courses because I think I have a love-hate relationship with them, and I would do everything different now. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But it was about creating your own deck. And there were lots of, there was some history of tarot. There was an exploration of the structure of the deck, and then also drawing exercises and writing exercises. And my idea was really just to open up your creativity. It wasn't about, oh, we're going to produce, go to a press and actually, produce a physical deck, but just the sketches using tarot as the guide, and how to revision it too. Because not everyone wants, like the very famous Rider-Waite deck, which is very English and very, filled with Christian imagery and very pastoral. There's people who love tarot that don't want that.
Mm-hmm.
So encouraging all the ways it can be different.
Right. And you had this, I read somewhere someone asked you, like, what's like the most important thing for people in creating their own decks? And I wrote down this quote because I think it's wonderful and it fits in perfectly with all creative people. And you defined it as with one word, courage. And you said, in order to be yourself and to tell your story, it helps to be fearless, vulnerable, and allow yourself to feel, allowing yourself to draw or write how you feel. That's the hard part, that letting go. But that's what will cause you to create something unique and authentic and beautiful. And I could not agree more with that quote. I think like it really.
I like that. That's good.
Yeah, good job. But could you talk about that? Because I think that's one of the most important things for not just creating your own tarot deck, but just creating anything.
Yeah, I think people are afraid. I mean, I think they are afraid of others seeing their insides. I mean, if you don't expose yourself, I don't think anyone's going to care. At least I'm not. Mm-hmm. The art that I'm drawn to is full of exposure. And it does take a kind of stupid courage to do that. Like, are we allowed to swear on your show?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. It's like, here's my shit. Here it is. Here's everything that I'm ashamed of or afraid of, or here's everything I don't want anyone to see. Here it is. I've made something of it. That's the art that I'm going to be interested in. And it does take courage to, I want to say, to not care what people think. It's like we always care a little, right? But if we can get really, really close to the edge of, I'm going to expose it. Here it is. Here I am. This is me. This is what I have to share. Then incredible art can be made, I think, when that leap happens.
Yeah, and I think especially for when it comes to like finding your audience, like I think anybody can tap into when somebody's kind of phoning it in or when somebody's kind of faking it. But I think anybody can really tap in when the person's being like bearing their soul, Yeah,
and then they can find you.
Right.
It's like internet dating, which it's just like internet dating. Because or any kind of dating, you need to show who you are so that someone who's going to like you can find you. Otherwise, they're just going to see a mirage, or someone else.
Right. Once you go on that first date, it's kind of hard to not fake it.
Yeah. All the metaphors go back to dating. That's how it works.
Unfortunately. So the book came out on June 1st. What has that experience been like? Because this is your first book, right?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. What has that been like?
As I keep saying, decades later. It was amazing. I mean, the process was intense. It was super, super intense. Like I was saying at the start of the show, I was or am a poet trying to figure out how to write a nonfiction book. And thank God I have this amazing editor who gave me the greatest advice, because I had written one book and she said, Aliza, we have to get to Saturn sooner, because I was being a poet. Anyway, so the process was very intense. I pretty much wrote 2 books in a year with short deadlines, really short turnaround. It comes in phases because there was the process before it came out, right? Like the writing. And then there's the phase of, well, now everything's done. So now we're working on publicity. And then there's the phase of when it's out, and they're all very distinct. So now it's like waiting. Now it's, well, what's it going to do? Now it's doing podcasts and promoting it and trying to get people to buy it. So it's sort of,
a different process.
Yeah. It's like, I don't want to say boring, but the phases are very distinct with publishing. And that was also all new to me. So now it's, how can I keep this baby alive? This is my baby. I don't want the baby to die. I want the baby to have a nice life. So how do I give it what it needs? the proper nutrition and attention to keep the baby alive.
Absolutely. Well, we'll help keep the baby alive. You can get the Little Book of Saturn basically everywhere. We'll have it linked up at today's show notes page, though, at yourcreativepush.com/294.
And getting reviews is super fun. Seeing Amazon reviews for the first time.
Ooh.
Or, other places, that's just, and getting people's response, or people send pictures, like my niece. I got a picture of my niece with the book, or a picture of a client, her son, little kid is holding the Saturn book. All that stuff is fun.
It's a real thing out there in the world.
Yeah. I was telling someone that's a really cool feeling. If you have a book, I'm actually in your house. If you own it, I'm there, because you pour your soul into it. If you're, any kind of artist, whatever you're making, that's your soul. And then if you're a writer, your soul is mass produced. So but you're sitting there like, I don't know what room you have my book in, because I had sent you, but I'm in your kitchen, or I'm in your living room, wherever the hell it is, which that's pretty cool. And getting the reviews is cool. And hearing the response is exciting.
Well, let's see, you've been in my bedroom, you're in my office right now, you've been in my school bag. I don't think you've been in my bathroom, but
that is so cool. I love that. I absolutely love that.
Very
all
cool.
Over the house. Almost.
Yay. Aliza, this has been awesome, but it is time for the final push. And this is where I ask you to reach through the microphone and grab the shoulder of one of the listeners you've already really inspired today, and just give them your best final words of advice and really push them to pursue their own creative passions.
Okay. Don't give up. Don't give up. Be determined in your not giving upness, but be flexible regarding how it might show up. Like you might be a poet and then wind up being an astrologer. You might be a fiction writer and then be a poet, or a travel writer, or I don't know. Help me out here. I have no other metaphors for artists.
A podcaster and then end up being a zoologist.
Yeah, exactly. Just keep going. Don't give up, but it might be a little different. So be open to that you can use that passion as a podcaster, or as a painter, or as a poet. It's still you.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I always try to encourage people is, when you do move to another thing, like you're bringing the gifts that you had and the skills that you had from that other thing into this new thing.
Yes.
And you're gaining these new skills that you would have never thought about, and then you're going to bring that into your next thing. So it's totally cool, totally fine, and totally in your stars to to move on to another thing.
That's exactly it. I love the way you put that, because you're learning new things, but you haven't lost anything. And people are going to be drawn to all those. Let me see if I can make this make sense. People are going to be drawn to the parts of you that you haven't abandoned, that you're bringing to the new thing. Like it's still you. You're all there in it, even if it's expressed as a painter instead of a podcaster, or vice versa.
Absolutely. Could not agree more. Aliza, thank you so much for coming on the show today, for sharing your story, for teaching us about tarot, astrology.
Thank you too.
And again, the book is The Little Book of Saturn, and we'll have that linked up at today's show notes page for you to get, as well as everywhere you can find Aliza at yourcreativepush.com/294. Aliza, thanks again.
Thanks so much.
Oh, I told you all that was going to be a lot of fun. My thanks again to Aliza for coming on the show, for sharing her story, and for teaching us about astrology, tarot, and how thinking about the world in a different way can really help to not only spur our creativity, but also give us so much more confidence. And that's actually something that I really wanted to sink my teeth into from the episode, was that idea of validation, and how sometimes she is the only person to tell potentially creative people that they might actually be meant to do that creative thing that they've been thinking about doing, but have suppressed, maybe because other people have been so steadfast in telling them that it's the wrong thing to pursue, it's unsafe, it's unsatisfying, or it's potentially going to lead them to become homeless. So I think that is such a shame. And my disappointment is much less in the fact that you need that validation, because I think we all do need that validation. But it's more in the fact that there isn't that encouragement all around us from everybody that we encounter, everybody that's looking out for the best in us to encourage us to do the things that we actually want to do. And I get it, like totally. It's completely and totally ingrained in my psyche to make money. That's number one. Be able to support yourself, be able to stand on your own 2 feet, be able to be independent. And that's first, instead of thinking about being happy or doing the thing that brings you joy or fulfills you or will satisfy you your short time on this earth. But that was one of the things that really opened my eyes to the importance of things like astrology or tarot, is to have somebody that's in your corner, that's willing to kind of look into the distance with you as opposed to against you. And we talk all the time about the idea of needing permission, about needing somebody to tell us that, we can do this art thing, this creativity thing, this thing that we've always known that we should be doing in the back of our heads, but nobody ever gave us that push, great word, or that encouragement to, maybe you are supposed to do this thing. And I think that makes it super obvious why people like Aliza are so important to creative people. So if you are interested in further learning about this kind of stuff, I definitely recommend you go to Aliza's website, moonplutoastrology.com. If you want to get a reading for yourself like I did, which you can actually listen to for my Patreon supporters, or if you want to become one, yourcreativepush.com/Patreon. Or if you want to pick up Aliza's book or check out what she's up to, again, we'll have that all linked up at today's show notes page, yourcreativepush.com/294. But that is all I've got for you today. So hopefully you were inspired to go and get to your own creative passion. So go and get to work, and we will be here for you next week if you need that push again. I love you all so much. Keep creating wonderful things. Keep thinking about the world in different ways, and maybe venture out into some magical, mystical, woo-woo things this week. I'll see you next time. Bye. Never miss a push. Head to yourcreativepush.com/subscribe to find the easiest way for you to subscribe to the podcast.